Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is Tuesday, May 13th, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. And we have Douglas Farnham with us, Chief Recovery Officer, with an ARPA update. The last time we were here, Doug, you had said that you were going to be filing some reports or whatever, and we'd have more information in May. And here we are. So thank you for coming and giving us an update.
Thank you for having me, Madam Chair. For the record, Douglas Farnham, Chief Recovery Officer. Yes, the report that was recently filed with U.S. Treasury covered activity through March 31st of 2025. So this data is all current through the end of March. And we have until April 30th to file that report. And that's why you're able to take that, kind of summarize the data, and now we can talk about it. We had tried to do a monthly report during coronavirus relief fund times. We tried to do a monthly report between the quarterly reports, and it was far too burdensome for our departments to keep up with. So we end up just sticking with the quarterly schedule. So I'll start with the summary table.
Okay.
And what that does is there's two tabs in the spreadsheet that I shared. The summary table pulls together all of a department or agency's programs into how much money they're managing in their portfolio, give you a high level idea of the progress within each business unit. And then of course we have the bigger table that has, program by program. And from an ARPA perspective, we were able to, in December of 2024, kind of close out a number of these programs from the federal perspective. Mm-hmm. So we have, going off of the summary table, the first one you see with any type of flag, any type of coding on it is DHCD. And they have about 5.5 million remaining to expend in ARPA, out of just under 30 million. I think that money hasn't really been converted. We hadn't really done any swaps there. So that program has been progressing well. And even though it's got a slight tinge to it because it's over 5 million, so it's enough to keep our eyes on it. But it has been moving well. And I don't see any issues. It's primarily in just the closeout process and the finalization and payment for the rental housing improvement program.
That's what this is for?
Yes. Yeah, 4.8 million of the 5.5 is related to the rental housing improvement. So that's all obligated. Work is being done. People just haven't received the final grant payments yet. So the money hasn't been formally expended on the vision side. But I do think things are well underway to be expended well ahead of the 12/31/2026 deadline.
And Doug, the next time you would report on this would be, is it quarterly? So at the end of June, we would be able to report again in July. Yeah. So maybe at the joint fiscal meeting, yes, July 31st, we could get an update. That would be great. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. I think one high level note again, before I kind of dig into the line items more, this last quarter, and this was anticipated because when we performed some of our programmatic swaps in December, we knew that we'd be reducing the amount of volume, right, that programs are moving in our. So we did go down to 30 million expended in the first quarter of 2025. We were just over 50 million in the previous quarter of normal activity. That 30 million, because we have 163 million left to spend, and that you can see in the top left of the summary table.
Oh, yeah.
If we were just doing a linear forecast, we'd be on track to spend before the deadline, but that's not how a lot of these programs are actually going to function. So I think I'm still tracking these programs because there may still be a need to perform some swaps. So this program, the 5.5 at DHCD, unlikely I'll need to take any action. I think this money is obligated, it's moving, it will be spent.
Okay. Great.
The next major, this is a slightly deeper tinge, is DCF with 14.4 $3 million. And that is all in the home weatherization program. We did consult with that program. They do have projections. They do have projects lined up to, and they believe that they'll be able to spend that. And based on their historical burn rate, they started with 55 million and they're down to 14. So
When did they get the 55 million?
2021, I believe,
Okay.
the first tranche.
Okay.
Well, in my tracker, it says 2022, but I thought that there was some money initially placed in 2021 in that
Yeah.
weatherization bucket. But 2022 at the latest.
Okay.
So, and that DCF weatherization program, there's a couple blends out there. And the DCF weatherization program is the lower income spectrum, the under 80% AMI. And, they maintain decent connections with that population and they're participating in other programs. So I think that all together that makes that 14 million fairly low risk of not being expended. My friends at DEC would probably not be happy with the color I used on their block.
59%.
Perhaps. But they would also not be surprised. And I do think DEC does also have a number of evolving factors in the federal environment right now with the Clean Water Revolving Fund. I think there are a lot of things that, depending on how they go one way or another, it might actually make it easier to spend this ARPA money faster. This is the biggest chunk of money that at ANR DEC that still needs to move is wastewater, yes, and municipal primarily. Sewer overflow has $20 million, 3-acre stormwater has $12 million. I think it's on page 3 or 4 of the detailed line items.
Why are they having so much trouble getting this out the door?
Well, I would say, they have spent 44 million at this point. So they have moved a good portion of their money. They always anticipated going right up to the end of 2026. So they're behind where we would all like them to be, but I don't think they're actually all that far behind the expected pace of and getting these projects done. And this is an area where, because we still have payroll capacity over the next 2 years, we could perform additional payroll swaps to convert some portion of this to general fund and retain it in the program.
Wayne and Tiff. Questions.
So those municipal treatment plants, do they have contracts? Are they, is the work just not progressing or have they not got them all lined up?
I believe all, if not nearly all of this money has been awarded and designated to projects.
This hasn't been drawn down. They haven't completed.
Right, the work hasn't been finished yet. That's the, right now, and we see the expenditure rate on these type of programs kind of stall out during the winter. And then a lot of it should pick up between now and November.
Is this for to repair existing systems, or is this for new construction?
I believe there is a blend, although the program with the largest amount of money outstanding does have the one that has $20 million in it, the wet weather sewer overflow. That's all dealing with known issues with existing systems. So these are things that have, had regulatory problems, right? And need correction. The next largest is in the 3-acre stormwater. So money to help with implementing the requirements of the 3-acre stormwater, which I forget exactly when that was passed, but it was before. Yeah.
This is,
seven.
thank you. Help me understand, a payroll swap. Does that not mean that the cost of that cost center doesn't then really show up until, I mean, what I'm concerned about when we do these payroll swaps, my understanding is, and I'm asking you to correct me on this, is that we are masking the costs of whatever agency or department it is that is getting this money to pay for payroll.
No, we took steps so that that wouldn't be taken into account in the budgeting process.
Okay,
Right. That was a concern. Yes.
Okay.
So when we do these one-time swaps, we record them and we keep them separate from all of the forms that are used to decide what agencies get during the budgeting process. So when you're looking at year over year, when you're looking at base versus one time, none of these ARPA swaps are allowed to interfere with that consideration. And when the agency of administration, so there were kind of two phases to this. Up to 12/31/2024, the agency was able to revert and then either restore the money back to the program, or if we didn't feel the program would complete by 12/31/2026, we did about 26 million of reversions to establish a hazard mitigation appropriation. Now we don't have that authority any longer. So if we take money from an ARPA program, we have two options in the agency. We either have to restore it to that program after swapping the general fund onto the approved list of payroll, which is around the state and completely unrelated to these programs, the payroll that we're covering. It has to be new employees that started after March of 2021. So it's not programmatic at all. It's just related to paying for state staff costs. And then we either have to restore that to the program. So in this case where the wet weather sewer overflow has $20,456,660 left to go. And we look at the projections and we say, that's not likely to happen, right? In order to protect Vermont from losing this money back to the federal government, say we take 10 million of that, we apply it to payroll around the state, then the agency would give it back to in our DEC as general fund. The legislature in the next session in the BAA or in the budget could decide there are higher and better uses of that general fund at that point, but there would no longer be a clock on it. And we are going to maintain transparency over any swaps that we perform. They'll be reported to the Joint Fiscal Committee. And the other option is we can take the money. If we get Joint Fiscal Committee approval, that money could be applied to a different already established ARPA project. But that money, like I said, that requires us to go to Joint Fiscal with a specific list and say, we took $5 million from here. We think it should go to this project in this program. And they get the final word on whether that is allowed to happen or not.
John, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So, so in this particular area here, ARPA is going to help rebuild whatever the municipal wastewater issues that have happened here from the flooding stuff here. Are those projects pretty much, you have to kind of estimate what it might cost here. You never know what you're going to get into here. So you're pretty much staying within what you're estimating. I'm just asking that question.
Yeah.
Just given it's sort of, for some reason, it's not going to cost X amount here. You got something that might be applied elsewhere, maybe to upgrade something else, and maybe wasn't affected, so more of a new project upgrade, perhaps. Can that happen in that direction?
I think that's the other reason this $63 million needs to be monitored closely and why I'm keeping an eye on it is that we have municipal projects, which for one reason or another fall through at various stages in the process, right? They get in there and the actual work turns out to be cost $2 million more.
Right.
And they can no longer pencil it out. They can no longer make the project work. So we have had municipalities that have had to back away from a project. And then we've had to reassign those funds to a different project. Because with ARPA funds in particular, we can no longer grant any new municipal wastewater projects with ARPA funds. So unless we were swinging that money over to an existing award that for whatever reason needed additional funding, we would have to put the money towards payroll or towards some other program. Treasury won't allow us to start a new project at this point, essentially. So yes, there have been projects over the last couple of years canceled because of cost overruns, because estimates came in low. And once the actuals were in, the ratepayers are like, there's no way we can support that project.
So is that where the payroll swap may come into play there?
It may, but
Or not?
it may or may not help, right?
Right.
Because say the state of Vermont has committed $2 million towards a $10 million project. Information comes in and now that's a $13 million project. We don't have more than $2 million. So if the municipality can't figure out that plan and make that project achievable, and sometimes that means we go to USDA Rural Development. Historically, we've always helped them try to find more grants to make it work. But in some cases, we're just not able to make the project happen. And then if we wanted to be able to give the money that freed up from that project falling through to a different project, that's where the swapping would be necessary. Because our payroll obligations are established with Treasury. And so we can put ARPA towards those payroll obligations because they're existing projects as of 12/31/2024. But those new wastewater projects wouldn't qualify.
Thank you.
I'm looking at the sheet now. So the second to last line on page 3 is the AOA administration, administrative costs, public sector rehiring and higher ed. This represents roughly 25% of what we received. It looks like to me, based on the total award.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, what are the administrative costs? Is this for like paying for the consultancies for places like Guideposts or whatever the name of the guidehouse or whatever it is?
Yes.
And if that's the case, like how much did we end up paying them? I think I've heard that we no longer have a contract with them, or they're not working for us quite as hard as they did a couple of years ago.
Yes.
But can you just go over what those three things are and how they break down on that 274 million?
Yes, I don't have the exact figures in my head on the breakdown there, but that 274 includes we took all of the remaining revenue loss capacity that was distributed across a number of different programs, and we used that revenue loss capacity through this AOA line item for the higher education payments to UVM, VSAC, and the state colleges, because that was an eligible use of revenue loss funds for the state. And then we gave pretty much all of that money directly back to the programs where it came from, with the exception of the hazard mitigation funding that we established. So that was most of this money with ARPA funds. And then we did the payroll swaps, which came in at roughly 50 million. I'd have to pull it, but I know for a fact that the guidehouse payment was less than 10 million. I believe it's 6 million or so. But at this point, we actually don't have an active team for our state fiscal recovery support with Guidehouse. We pull them on for assistance with the annual report process in May and June, because that report is hundreds of pages long and we don't have the staff to generate it internally and collect all of the information. And That's essentially all we're using for them for ARPA at this point. And then if we do get in an audit scenario, like we are being audited for a coronavirus relief fund, if we have a question that we need their assistance on, we would activate them to help with the audit defense. But yes, that line was, that line was extremely small prior to pulling in the payroll swap and the higher education. So I can, should have brought a pen. I can get you the breakout of this portion was payroll swap, this portion was higher education payments, and this portion was for we use that appropriation for Guidehouse, but also we cover a lot of the limited service positions. There were 80 limited service positions approximately. Thank you. And the ones that don't have direct programmatic funding, we fund through the AOA appropriation. So we've spent more on limited service positions than we have on ARPA, on Guidehouse. But it's a blend of that contract plus the limited service.
So if ARPA didn't, the concept of payroll swap, I know Representative Blooming just kind of started that question of just that idea of, in this case, can I assume that the payroll swap is that if there were people who work for the state limited service or not, who were doing ARPA related work, that you were able to, I mean, this sounds like you were able to say that we can use this money to pay for Vermont state employees' payroll and then use the cash that we would have used for other projects. Is that an accurate way of looking at it? I'm just trying, I know that we've been very creative in how we've been able to find out what we're able to use. And I'm just more curious about what that phrase payroll swaps, what does it actually mean? Does that mean your time as an employee, that as an example, I'm not asking you to,
Right.
but as an example, that a state employee's time that was, measured against, I'm working with this community on flood related issues, that you could swap that out? Is that how that worked?
So we have the traditional federal admin, where if we have an employee that's working on the federal program that was created by ARPA, we are recording that time, and that is just regular administrative time. And that's kind of how federal funds traditionally allow you to, use federal funds to run a program that you're running with their money. The payroll swap in the Treasury rules called rehiring of public sector capacity. And part of the American Rescue Plan Act was states were allowed to use ARPA funds to rehire public sector capacity that had nothing to do with any coronavirus program. It was a response to a lot of states had to let a lot of staff go. And we also got credit for the number of full-time employees that we dedicated to the pandemic response. And so we got a calculation of FTEs that Vermont could use the money to pay for. The legislature and the governor worked together to spend the money on more concrete things like infrastructure. But in order to spend the money more quickly and have the federal books closed out, we're applying it to that rehiring of public sector capacity category. And then, so these employees, many of them are actually, they're all around state government. There's a lot in Department of Corrections, places with high turnover that have hired staff since the pandemic started. That's where most of our investments, they have to be almost entirely general funded because they can't be mixed up in any other federal calculation. So we had swaps at Department of Corrections, Department of Taxes. I think we avoided AOT entirely because of the T fund and how that complicates things. But generally, yes, we took the ARPA fund, formally expended it there, and then moved it back to the program that the legislature created in the first place. So my capacity is just being paid for by the ARPA rule for the most part. I'm funded personally by a mix of FEMA and ARPA. So I don't have any general fund right now because I'm always working on federal projects of one sort or another.
Well, that's interesting just to know they changed the rules somehow.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're paying attention. Wayne?
So you're fairly confident when everything sugars off that we'll be in a position where we don't have to revert too much money, or that they don't come after us to take money back because it wasn't spent appropriately.
That's the other reason. Yes. The main reason for using the payroll, the rehiring of public sector capacity or the payroll replacement category is that it's a very simple category, right? It's not programmatic. It doesn't rely on any determination of whether or not this person was eligible for a program, et cetera. It just looks at when was the employee hired, what were they paid? And that's one reason we at the administration chose to put a lot of money into that category. Higher education payments, limited number of variables, right? 3 payments, over $100 million of revenue loss capacity. We made sure that the payments that there were no eligibility issues with that. So we kind of pre-audited those groups of payments. And that way, $250 million of ARPA funds were expended in a very confined space. And that makes me feel much better from an audit perspective. Otherwise, we have 80 programs where Treasury could go through the program, find issues. There's still a lot of space for them to take issue with things that we may have done. But I think anywhere we do the rehiring of public sector capacity, we're actually reducing our audit risk.
So I want to go back to the clean water ones on, I don't feel like we finished that. And
Yeah.
you have the total on the summary table, but I was looking at the other one on page 3 probably. And, 3 acre, 70% is unspent, village wastewater 75, wastewater pretreatment 72%, wet weather sewer overflow 76, clean water board grant 65% unspent. So I'm worried about that. I feel like a broken record because I've asked that in joint fiscal committee for the last couple of years too, and I'm worried. I've been worried about DEC from the beginning, and I haven't lost that worry. So what's happening with those? Where are you thinking swaps might happen? Where are you feeling confident that we're going to spend this money?
So I am honestly, if you look at, in answering your question, I want to just say, if you look at the other areas where we have financial exposure remaining on ARPA, so we're down to 163 million out of $1 billion, right?
Yeah.
So we're at 15% left to go. The broadband board, they have 22 million. They've been spending very well. They have a huge book of work. They're going to spend that money. Zero concern that they're not going to spend that money. The HCB, I'm nearly as rock solid that they're going to spend that money, right? Unfortunately, their projects are expensive, right? But they're very good at making sure those projects move forward. So I'm very confident that $30 million will get expended. And we have 2 fiscal years of payroll that we can choose to swap, which would give us more than enough capacity to cure DEC's programs and give the legislature time to have direct conversations with DEC about their pace, about what they can and can't accomplish. And I think that what my role in it would be is to buy time for the conversation to happen. And if AOA does execute a swap this summer or at any time when we swap those funds, we would notify immediately. And it, of course, would not in any way limit the legislature's ability to make decisions about that money. It would actually open up more options to you.
It could be spent in other ways, but I think we all kind of wanted these clean water.
Yes.
The wastewater things, we have a lot of towns that, this last rainstorm, I was getting announcements from A&R about every 5 minutes from Rutland or Virgins or Middlebury or Montpelier about overflows.
Yeah.
So we clearly have issues. And so I'm concerned about the fact that the money isn't being spent, and what, are we consistently and considerably understaffed at DEC? Sort of what's happening here? Maybe that's not for you to answer.
Yeah, I would
I'm asking a few of these questions since you want to know whether you're going to have to do something with the money.
I have been, Madam Chair, and I would say I've been cracking the whip as much as I can and encouraging the programs to spend and to move. And I know that they are trying to. I think of anything in the ARPA portfolio, that's probably the biggest conversation is around that money. I personally think that those are excellent investments and
Yeah.
that they should be maintained, but and I can,
We can ask them to come in too. Wayne and then Jim.
Yeah, I see 3 acre, you got 3 acre rule in 3 different places on here. And question I have, you probably can't answer it, but question I have is obviously if anyone's applying, if nobody's applying for permits to do 3 acre stuff, then we obviously they're not gonna get grants of this money to help them. So I'm wondering whether it's a question for A&R, whether or not they're not able to get the money out the door or people aren't applying for it.
so the Forest Parks 3 acre was specifically for their parks, for their internal use.
You should get that.
BGS 3 acre, I've talked to them and they have plans on how to, they do need to use that money and then some to get to address their 3 acre issues. And then the $12 million 3 acre, if you'll notice in the prior quarter, or what they expended was 1.9 million. That 3 acre program is actually starting up now. So that 1.9 million was above what they had been. And I think we're starting to see movement there, which is good and encouraging.
More of a timing issue than a capacity issue.
I think it's been, yeah, taking them time to get this rolling, but it's starting to roll now.
Jim.
Yeah, related to that issue, on the 3 acre permitting, my understanding is the state, will pay for the engineering work, not the actual remediation work, but the permitting work. And the deadline for that to get an approved permitting with the engineering work is like maybe the end of September or October. So if it was done then, it's not gonna get paid until this fall. I don't know how much of the total that portion of the clean water is for the 3 acre stormwater.
I think honestly, most of it is tied up in that process, Representative. And that's why we're starting to see the expenditures move now. So like 1.9 million expended in the most recent quarter with 12 million to go. With the amount of time we have left, that doesn't actually give me as much heartburn, right? Because that divides out among the remaining quarters fairly well. It's the 367,000 spent with 20 million to go that I can't.
What was
Right.
that bucket for?
Wet weather sewer overflow.
The sewer overflow. And the program staff might have better answers about like, well, half of this is tied up in one major project. And once that gets going, then you'll see a big jump in expenditure.
Suspect a lot of that time is in the planning engineering phase, then it's November. They can't do anything until they have.
But if they aren't even at that phase, that's,
Right.
you should be doing a lot of planning before you actually execute, but if they haven't even started that.
Right.
But even on the 3 acre permitting, some of those are not gonna make it. Get all their engineering work done by this fall.
For the current deadline.
Right, shortage of engineers that are, so. I don't know how much of that will actually end up.
I would say healthy homes. This program has been interesting to me from the very beginning. So I've asked more questions about it. That program, I know the work list there and I know that it's fully subscribed. And I'm confident that program will get through that entire amount of money.
That's only 24% unexpended. That's doing the best of the bunch in that.
Yeah.
The 5, so.
Yeah, that one is probably the healthiest financially.
Great. And switching over from that to, you didn't highlight it, but AOE on your summary page, that was 26% of 4.35 million. And what was that for?
That one had the lightest of possible shadings on it, I think.
Right, yeah, I can tell we're bled through from the other page.
Primarily, Madam Chair, that was for the indoor air quality. program, and that is limited to a specific list of school grants. So there's a known list of grants that make up that 3.6 million that needs to be expended still. Because of just like with engineers, we have a problem with the number of available contractors to perform weatherization work. So it's certainly not completely low risk, but I think that one will be largely expended, and if necessary, a small portion of that could be swapped to make sure that it wasn't recaptured.
So the projects have been identified for this. You
Yes.
just need the workers to do the work.
One thing one thing I intend to do in monitoring the ARPA portfolio, making sure that it closes out properly, is yes, this summer or next January, we may do a round of swaps to bring down some of the balances.
Mhm.
And then we would retain capacity so that we can take corrective action in the fall of 2026 and kind of zero out any programs with remaining balances. And just from the rough cut of the numbers, I think as long as we don't drop too far below the 30 million a quarter spending rate, we should have enough capacity to zero out our portfolio in the fall of 2026.
So 30 million a quarter.
So is AOT one of those light colored ones as well? Under AOE on the first page.
It's only 60, no, might be.
The DOT, let me look at their, yes, most of their 3 acre, that entire outstanding balance is related to their 3 acre program. And with the amount of properties, they haven't spent it yet, but I did have a conversation with them and they have a defined list of what they're going to spend it on. And that's all internal.
Timely basis.
Yes. Yeah. I'm confident they'll be able to spend that 2.8. With the amount of properties that AOT has subject to that rule around the state, they have a
Well, I'm
lot
sure
of
they
work to do.
have it. It's just a matter of actually executing, and that's the part I'm worried about.
They're busy on the roads right now. So,
Like Flood Resilient Communities Fund at DPS. I know that money will be spent. We have a backlog of hazard mitigation projects and other things to spend the money on. So we have more than enough for that.
And we talked about the other two down at the bottom. No worries about those. Ag did receive that money more recently, but historically, they've moved money very quickly once they have it. We know what that, I'm just looking, let's see, Clean Water Board Ag Program and Water Quality Technical Assistance. Yes, they received 3 million and they spent 1.1 million of that in the previous quarter. So their burn rate is very high compared to what they have left to go. I would be surprised if they have any money left at the end of this calendar year. I'm just going up that page and looking at the state technology modernization. Is that what it is? Case management system upgrade. Got 1.7 million. They still have 1,682,000 that they haven't spent. So which one was that?
which page are you on?
It's on the second to last page. Click from the top, says State Technology Mod SAS. The
Stable page.
Just got an email about something while we are speaking. Maybe it's a good thing you're here.
Seem hopeless.
Yeah.
Cancellation of digital equity.
Yes.
Of the $5.3 million grant. That's a
Another 5+ million was expected over the course of the next few years, resulting in a total loss of over 10 million in grant funds.
Less than ideal, certainly, Madam Chair. I would point out, we do still have a $228 million bead award. And
Right.
I think,
They're in better shape than some others.
and even retaining the matching funds for that award of that size is still somewhat of a challenge.
Anyway, that distracted us from this state technology case management. I wonder if you know anything about that.
I haven't had that one flagged as a significant risk. I believe it's proceeding.
It seems to me in a past conversation or discussion, did that get converted to general fund,
The case management one?
17 to 1.7?
Yeah.
Do we know what case management? System?
Well, it's the same thing that judiciary went through and they were doing it. The general's doing their thing. Yeah, it got,
Right.
it got changed.
Whose case management is that?
If it's SAS, it's the state's attorneys and sheriffs.
Oh, okay,
And it is judicial case management.
okay.
New system.
So we think they'll spend that.
Yes, I apologize. My eyes are crossing. I'm trying to find
I can understand why.
trying to find the right line item. Was that with?
It
Oh,
was, it was.
it was the bottom line. I'll check in on that one, because it's only at 17,000 expended.
Yes, exactly.
I can check into that program, Madam Chair.
Just be curious to know which one it is, which program. Okay. Well, these spreadsheets are a lot smaller than the ones we were looking at 2 years ago. It's great that, go ahead, Frank.
Clean Water Board grants. They've still got most of the money left on that one. Said an issue of, no, any issue there at all? Is it an issue of matching money from people that out there answers or any issue?
So that delay is, that was, I believe, primarily a timing issue where a certain amount of funding was given to the Clean Water Board, and it was divided out among the tiered priorities of the Clean Water Board. And because it took it was appropriated in the ability to appropriate it was given in the first year, but it was set for a couple of years. And so there was a year lag, basically, where the year after the Clean Water Board established it. But I do think that money has some of the same hurdles that the general DEC funding has. So it's got a very shared contractor pool, and the engineering resources are all the same engineers, and they're all the same ones that we diverted to flood work and hydrology studies over the last couple of years. So I think partly it was delayed by an allocation process, and partly it is behind schedule. So that money, honestly, may require action as well.
Yeah.
Yes, eventually, Madam Chair, we may be able to hide the rows of programs that have closed out. We didn't want to do it yet.
Yeah, oh, no, but, we're talking about a summary sheet that's this size. These things which we can now fit on 8.5 by 11 paper instead of my old sheets.
Right.
So, I mean, congratulations to you. I know that's a lot of work to pay attention to all of these things and, keep it whittling down and spending the money. So that is no easy task. So we appreciate that.
Happy to do it, Madam Chair.
I'm sure you'll be glad for the next thing.
We're not gonna make it on everything, I would expect. Do you have any back of the envelope estimate? that you would, we're looking for money.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's just, you
I mean, of the
know,
163 million,
yeah,
that's,
well, it's just, we don't know what the future is, and obviously we fenced off some of the budget, but it won't be enough. If
things happen.
I would say, I pray this does not come off sounding glib. We would be the victim of good decisions because these programs were all well constructed towards really strong priorities. So any of them that don't spend the money and AOA is able to give them a little grace period and extend the timelines, you'd then be forced with the decision of, do we pull money away from good priorities? And maybe you have more pressing priorities, right?
That's just it, that's the decision we have to make. I mean, in an ideal world, you wouldn't need it for other priorities, you could give it back for what the original plan. I totally get that, but that may not be, and again, I'm the one sounding like I did it down. That may not be the choice we're facing. Yeah.
So whether or not we perform swaps, we'll make sure that you have full information on how much a particular program has left.
Yeah,
And how fast they're spending it.
right. Well, we'll be getting quarterly updates from you, if not in this committee at joint fiscal. So we'll be able to hear how things are going.
Yeah, and I think to summarize I think most of these programs will spend by the timeline, but the program's focused on municipal infrastructure, which is a dire need right now. Those are in the most risk of not spending in time.
Hoping for a dryish summer would be nice too.
Absolutely.
Too dry.
You know, dryish. You hear what I said?
No drought.
Carefully
but-
chose
Yes.
that word.
Right. Dry for you. Might be different than dry for me.
Great. Anything else you want to say that we haven't had a chance to hear from you?
For the committee, just piece of interest. In the realm of mingling of, keeping track of how all these different programs fit together, interplay. One of the major pieces of interest, I think, is that we do have this community development block grant disaster relief recovery money, 67.6, I think, million that we're rolling out the plan for the deployment of that. Once HUD accepts that plan, then we would, I think, go to joint fiscal. That one is under the the regular CDBG code, so it's kind of, but anyway.
You're not worried about losing that grant?
No, the interactions with HUD have been very positive at this point. That program has a much better reputation than FEMA. Although HUD did suffer some staffing losses,
Yes.
there hasn't been the same attacks on the program itself that we see with FEMA. So that I'm pretty confident that award will continue to move forward. There are some very large awards to North Carolina and other places that help our situation
Yes.
because we're in the same bucket. And there's also $31 million of USDA rural development money that should be rolling out in Vermont and becoming available to municipalities primarily. So I know that there's a lot of noise at the federal level right now, but there are still a couple of positive developments and recovery recently. So that's nearly $100 million.
Great.
It'll help a lot.
Yes, it will. Excellent. Okay. Any other questions? Not seeing anything. Thank you so much for coming in. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your work, and we'll look forward to hearing your next update. So committee, things changing in this committee. We were going to hear a bill, but it's still in Ways and Means, so we're not going to hear that bill. Tomorrow, we are going to hear S-109, which is a judiciary, miscellaneous judiciary procedures. As I understand it, it's really about some per diems in a couple of groups. So think it came out unanimously out of judiciary. And then at 3:00, because on the floor, we're gonna get S53, that's the doula. We'll have that and be asked to vote on this. So we have a few bills that are coming. In fact, we have 6 that we're gonna be getting, and we're gonna deal with 3 this week. And I don't know when the other 3 we're gonna get. So the 3 we're gonna have this week are S109 tomorrow, judiciary, S53, the doulas in the afternoon, and then on Thursday, the healthcare S126. Okay, the other 3 bills in order are S122, S123, and S124. Oh, wait, no, 124, we doesn't need to come, 127. That's the
Chip.
housing bill, the CHIP, that's the one that got delayed from today. So most of the time, when those are coming into us now, we're getting at the end of the session, they're gonna ask us to vote. Come in, vote. I can send you an email with the list of the bills so that you can start looking at them. I also listen to testimony, in case you're really interested in listening to testimony, Ways and Means. Tom Cavett was in Thursday afternoon to talk about the CHIP program, and because we wanted our economists to weigh in on suggestions. And then because I was in the kitchen doing something, I listened to all of their Friday testimony. They met about 3 different times over the course of the day. And Ways and Means. So if you want to hear S127 and hear some testimony, feel free. I know they'll be meeting again about it. So I don't know when that's coming. The other 3.
You ever think about taking up golf or something?
I was planting my garden on Sunday. I wasn't listening to testimony then. No, I wasn't listening to testimony. This morning I was listening to Senate Finance while I was having breakfast, and I ended up almost being late here because I just get sort of backed up.
Away with it, huh?
I do, and they were doing education finance. It was kind of wacky. They're still circling the drain.
Put a little speaker out in your garden so you can listen.
I could do that. I have earbuds. I could listen, but anyway, it's occasionally, I don't spend a lot of time listening to testimony, but some of these are coming through. The harder bills are gonna start coming through. The doula bill should be pretty easy. Anywhere where there's serious money, we have set it aside in the budget. That doesn't mean we've approved it, as I'm sure Jim told you in your caucus too. All it means is if it doesn't pass, it drops to the bottom line. So we haven't committed anything to any particular bill, but they're accounted for, put it that way. So our situation may change as bills come in and out, get held back in committee, somebody else's committee get moved quickly. I have a meeting about one of these bills later this afternoon, and I may know more then, but we have these 3 bills between tomorrow and Thursday morning that we know of at this point. So just keep your eye on your text and on the agenda.
Do you want
Yes.
us to reach out to our budget buddies? Or is that?
So I thought about that, but the fact is that if anybody asks questions, it probably should come to the 3 of us. So if your budget buddies ask questions, have them chat with one of the 3 of us. We're gonna have our office hours tomorrow after the floor. The floor shouldn't be very long. It looks like there's one bill that got postponed from today, and so there's one piece of action. And then the 3 of us will hang out for a little while and see if other people have questions. And
Towel for crying.
sorry.
Towel for crying.
Are you sending out a link with the document?
Yes.
And then maybe, I know the speaker announced, but maybe a reminder about.
Oh, I'll do that too. Yeah, this, I.
Oh, okay. You did. I know I heard it.
I know, chill, Robin, it's all safe.
They even called you Aaron last week.
I know. I think you just have to put a couple dollars in.
Oh, yeah, you owe her a few.
All right, so we will be back live tomorrow at 11.